So, Frederik, we are very sorry that you cannot be with us in Suceava.
No, I'm quite busy in court actually, so.
Yeah, there's a lot of trouble with all the new legislation, but we are happy that you say that you could help us with some opinions on some hot topics that we have also in debate in Suceava. So first of all, I would like to ask you, what do you know about the answer of the European Court of Justice regarding all the files that have been intended by many countries, including Belgium with one association, regarding the mobility package?
Yeah, in the case of the Belgian association, I'm actually the lawyer who's doing that case. We introduced a claim before the European Court of First Instance, actually, which was rejected for procedural reasons. And now we went into appeal before the European Court of Justice itself, and it's still ongoing. For the moment, there's not a lot going on there. But on the pressure of this case, also the Belgian authorities, and Belgium is a very complex country because a lot of this legislation is for the regions. It's actually the Flemish region who pushed it the most. They did not introduce a demand in court themselves, but they went along with demands which were done by Malta, actually. So Malta was one of the original claimants in European court, as was Romania, as was Poland, Lithuania, Cyprus, if I'm not mistaken. I know there were 3 private demands, which one of whose I did, and then there's the one from UNTR. I don't know how that is going. I think they will have a little bit of the same procedural problems as I have seen in this case, because it's very difficult for a private person or a private enterprise or a group of private enterprises, which is UNTR of my client in the Belgian case, to get before the European Court of Justice. But the cases are still ongoing. It will take, I think, still a lot of time before we get a final answer on the mobility package for these kinds of questions. I have myself 2 other cases which could be important, not so much for the mobility package, but on social dumping in European Court, which were introduced after a demand from the Belgian High Court. I took a couple of cases to the Belgian High Court, and these cases are ongoing. I've seen that Romania did not intervene in these cases, which is a little bit of a pity, because we could have used every support we could get. For example, in these 2 cases, I get a lot of support from the Polish and the Lithuanian governments, but not from Romania. So that's a little bit of a pity. The 2 other cases I'm doing is one about the importance of the transport license on social dumping cases. So the question if there's a transport license, if another member state can say that you have to pay social security in for example, Belgium or in France, if you get a transport license from, for example, Romania or Slovakia. In the 2 cases, one was with Slovakia and the other one was with, I think, Lithuania. That's one case. And the second case I'm having in European Court concerns the question of the A1 documents. We already in the past couple of years talked a lot about the importance of the A1 documents. And this question goes around the procedure on how countries like Belgium can try and withdraw the A1 documents, which is also important for Romania, because we have seen that the way the CNPP, the Casa Națională de Pensiuni in Romania is handling these cases is giving us a lot of problems for Romanian companies who get sued here in Belgium, because they are not doing their work, actually. So Belgium is asking them all kinds of information. They are not answering. And if they're not answering, then that's a problem for us, because then the Belgian authorities can say, look, they are not answering, so we don't have to take into account the opinion of the Romanian authorities, and we can proceed like we want. So that gives us quite a lot of problems. Actually, I had to intervene a couple of times myself towards the CNPP to get any answers, which was mostly favorable, but I think they don't have enough persons to handle these cases. So I would really, really like them to invest a little bit in this and to try and protect not only the Romanian transport companies, but also the Romanian state, because, you know, if the Belgians say, okay, you have to pay social contributions in Belgium, then of course they are going to have to repay the social contributions in Romania. So it would be a good thing for Romanian also, for the Romanian government to be a little bit more attentive to this. So to resume, concerning the cases of the mobility package, I think it will at least take another 1 or 2 years before we get an answer. We will now have to await the opinion of the how you call it, the avocat general, which is the advisor, which is in most cases followed. So that will be a very important step once he writes his opinion. I haven't seen any in any of the cases yet. I try to follow them from time to time, but I think it's a little bit too soon. And in the other 2 cases, we are also awaiting the same opinion, but I think we are a little bit further in the procedure there, because there's less people involved, less countries than in the other cases. I'm also surprised to see that in the cases about the mobility package, why European Court has not already taken these cases together, because it would make sense to group them a little bit more. It would be easier to follow. Now you have all these individual demands with all these individual procedures. It would make sense, and they have done it in other cases, to take per subject of the mobility package. As you know, there are at least 3 big subjects. The one is the driving times thing. The second is the return home and everything concerning the license and the cabotage. And the third part is the detachment rules. It would make sense to take them together. So we will see what happens. It's really exciting times as a lawyer to live in, but it's difficult to give any correct advice for the moment.
Do you think that taking the situation that we already applied this mobility package, they could hurry up a little bit? Because if they come in 2 years with something opposed with the current legislation, that meaning disturbing quite a lot the market.
Yeah.
For the instance, you see a lot of companies that move the companies in Germany, for instance, the offices and companies. And if there will not be an obligation to return of the truck, why to have a new company in Germany? And it's not easy to move it back.
Yeah, but let's take the Germany example for another reason, because there are more reasons than only the return of the truck to move to Germany. I can explain that if you want. There's more than one reason. I have quite a lot of people moving. I think this year only, from January to now, we advised about, I think, 4,000 trucks which were moved from all over Eastern Europe towards Germany, and I have more coming home to Belgium. Actually, I also have quite a lot who are going to Belgium. But that's not the only thing. The main problem is going to be the legislation is there. You know, you have to respect this. The question is, what happens if you get a control, you're not in order, and they fine you? Because I think at this time, the problem is going to be if we attack this kind of controls, and we can, in court. I already have cases, mostly about the return of the driver, actually. And if we attack them in court, then the courts are going to have to await also the decisions of the European Court. So it would be a good thing if they proceed a little bit faster, but there's no way to push them to do so. So I don't know. It's going to be difficult. I think that if they are doing the controls for the moment, and if you take these controls and go into the court against these decisions, we should ask the courts to also ask new questions to the European Court to get the pressure a little bit higher, so that they understand that this legislation is there and that something needs to be done quite soon. However, and if I'm being really honest, I think it would be a mistake for everybody in transport and logistics to think that the whole of the mobility package is going to disappear. It's not. I think the cases which have the highest possibility of success are the return of the truck. There's a point to be made there, especially in view of the European Green Deal. I think you are aware of the argumentation. And I think there's also a bit of support from the European Commission from that side. That's one part of the things which could be changed. And the second one is cabotage, because this cabotage rules, they are actually going against the natural order of things, which would be a liberalization of cabotage. I did quite a lot of work on this myself. We did historical research on all cases of European courts concerning cabotage, and European Court always stated, look, in the long term, cabotage should be something which should be liberated, not restricted more. And that's exactly what they have done now. So there's a case to be made also from that viewpoint. But you know, we will have to see how soon they go, and in the meantime, how the controls is going to go. What I do see is that there are a lot of companies who are not respecting the mobility package as yet, and that's going to give problems. And I think that the most, for me, I think I already said it in the past and during previous interviews, for me, the most important part of the mobility package is not the return of the truck or even the driver. It's actually the detachment rules. And honestly, I don't think they are going to abolish them. So one of the reasons for going to Germany is not only the return of the truck, but it's the whole package. It's to defend yourself against things we are seeing mostly in Belgium and in France, the social dumping cases. And if you're the problem with all these social dumping cases is always the same, that these cases start with a simple question, which is asked towards the driver during a roadside check. And they are asking, look, Mr. Driver, you work for a Romanian company, transport company, do you ever drive in Romania? And the answer in a lot of cases is no. I only return, the truck only returns once a year to do the technical control. And for the rest, we work in Western Europe. And this in itself is the start of a lot of the controls. However, if you are situated in Germany, and you know a lot of them drive in Germany, then they are going to ask the same question. Oh, Mr. Driver, it can be the same driver, but now on a German payroll. Hello, Mr. Driver, you drive for a German company. Do you drive in Germany? Of course I drive in Germany, because it's a destination country, and I do quite a lot. And you see, you get it's only a small part of the discussion, which is a lot more complex for sure, but it gives you a good idea that these moves to, especially for bigger companies toward Germany, they do make sense, actually, not only in view of the mobility package, but also in view of the whole social dumping case problems. It makes a whole lot more sense to go there. It's easier to organize. Of course, it's a little bit more expensive.
But do you think that if a company respects the posting rules, is going to be any accusation of social dumping on this company? Social dumping as a danger still remain?
Yes and no. If you look at I've written quite a lot about this. I made a big article which made quite a fuss over here in Belgium about the return of the driver, because you know there were a lot of Eastern European companies who said, okay, the driver will sign a paper that he doesn't have to go home and that he doesn't want to, and then it's finished, which I think honestly is a stupid idea if you look at the social dumping cases. Why? And the same applies actually for the return of the truck. If you're not going to respect the return of the driver and the truck, they are going to use it here in these social dumping cases. So they will say, look, your driver is not going home, your truck is not going home, which proves that actually your center of business is in Western Europe. So your company should have been registered in Western Europe, in Belgium or whatever, the main country where you are working. Should be registered here. You should pay social contributions here, fiscal contributions here, etc., etc., etc. So we get a lot of these cases. On the other hand, if you respect the mobility package, so if the drivers are really going home every month, or at least going back to the company seat in Romania, if the trucks are really going home, this could be an argument for us, for the defense, to stay like, look, European law allows a driver to stay for at least 3.5 weeks in Western Europe. So you cannot make an argument there. The European law allows the truck to drive around in Western Europe for at least 8 weeks. So this is an argument for us. But the most important one, and it's always the same, is that we have to prove that local minimum law has been respected. And I think the biggest challenge is going to be there.
But as far as you know, the remuneration we talk about includes also the salary and the duty allowance, as we.
Yeah, but the duty, I'm not agreeing with the last part about this duty allowance. We have had a whole lot of cases about this here in Belgium. Not only for, I have cases from Romania where the question is the diurna, should it be included in wage comparison, because that's the whole question, or not? I think the correct answer, most courts actually for the moment in Belgium answer no, they should not be taken into account. I don't think that's the correct answer, honestly. I think the correct answer is that you have to compare correctly. So you should check your salary against the Belgian salary and the Belgian costs against the costs or the allowances you get in Romania. So for example, if you take a Belgian driver, he has a right to his minimum salary per hour, which is about 12.5 euros for a moment per hour. Then he has right to an hourly allowance. It's not per day, but per hour, which is about 1.5 euro, something like that, per worked hour. And he has right to a night allowance, which is about 35 euros. Can be a little bit more, but I'm just rounding up. Which means that if you look at this, the wage of a Belgian driver, he gets 12 euros an hour times, let's say he works 40 hours a week or 160 hours a month, and then he gets this cost. And you should compare these two against each other. Now, the major question is going to be, and I don't know for Romania, I know the answer for Poland, for example, is how is Romania going to handle in its internal legislation the diurna? Is it going to be part of the salary or not? That's the major issue. And I know that, for example, in Poland, they made a very good, actually a very clever response to that. They said, look, in Polish law, now all diurna, it's called diety there, they have been abolished. You cannot pay any diety to a driver anymore. Which of course is not good news for the transport companies, because all of a sudden they have to pay social contributions and fiscal contributions to the whole of the salary. So it's included in your salary, but they are giving minuses to the amounts you have to pay, which are exactly the same as the daily allowance. So that's a very clever way to handle this. I don't know how Romania is already looking upon this and are they going to treat this. But if we can prove that under Romanian law, the diurna is considered as part of the wage, then we can take it into account, or at least we can take it into account in comparing costs, because a driver who drives in Belgium has also right, not only also an international driver on the mobility package, not only for this 12 euros and a half per hour, but he also has right on this cost allowance according to Belgian law. So it's actually quite complex for the moment.
In our legislation, you have a new definition of remuneration, and the remuneration includes both the salary, the wage, and we call it indemnization, indemnizație.
Yeah, but I think actually I fear, if I'm really honest, my biggest fear is that we will end up in European Court also about this. We already had this first case. It's the Rapidsped case, which I think you are aware of. It's an Hungarian case in transport. There are a couple of cases from Poland from before. And I think sooner or later, somebody is going to raise the question towards European Court, should this diurna, in view of the fact that it's considered as being part of the wage in Romania, should it be taken into account, yes or no? For the moment, I know I have, as you know, a lot of Romanian clients, and there are a couple of them who say, okay, we will support this. We will say that it's, for us, it's part of the wage, and then we will take it from there.
In our legislation, it said that you can give this indemnizație inside of the remuneration if this sum does not include the posting expenses like transport, food, or accommodation.
I think there's a case to be made, so that would be actually be a very good point. I heard a little bit of the same from different of my clients who also told me the same thing. I think the sum is also limited to a part of the total wages, which would mean that you can take it into account. However, I think that a lot of them are forgetting that you have to make the full comparison. That's what I see in practice. I see a lot of companies say, okay, we can take the diurna as part of the wage, but they forget that you also have to pay the Belgian cost allowance. And then you still have a discrepancy. So one of the big issues I've been faced with in the last 4 months, let's say, is a lot of clients asking me, are we in order? Do we pay enough? And it's a very difficult question because nobody, you know, that the European website where normally all the minimum wages for drivers should be listed, it's not functioning. You don't find a lot of relevant information on there. If you have a driver who is really driving internationally in 5, 6, 7, 8 countries in 1 month time, how to calculate his wages is a very difficult thing. And we have seen 2 approaches to this. One approach is to make sure that the whole of what he is being paid, so including his salary, his daily allowances, bonuses, costs, whatever, that the whole is at least as much as the most expensive country where they drive in. That's one approach. That's the simplest one because you don't have to do the calculation each month. And then we see other companies who are really trying to calculate really per hour, saying, look, he has been driving so many hours in Belgium, which means so much. And there's a lot to be said for both approaches. The first is the easiest one, but it's more expensive. And the second one is more difficult from an administrative point of view. But something has to be done. That's for sure, because the controls will come. We know that, for example, in Belgium, there's this one service of inspection, and they now have been given the order that they only should do this kind of cases. So there are going to be more controls.
What do you mean service inspections?
Yeah, there's, you know, the Belgian inspection services, we have quite a lot of them in Belgium. We have the normal police, you have customs, you have 2 different kinds of social inspection, you have fiscal inspection. So these are all different inspection services. Now, from one of the social inspections, they took a part of the people out and they put them in, like, how should I call it, a specialized transport social inspection service. And they are in my side of the country, there are about 10 of them, and I see them in every case. So you always get the same persons. They know really well the legislation. They are really specialized, are quite clever. And of course, they are not going to stop just with the controls of the mobility package. For them, it's only a start, because they always want the big picture and then doing the social dumping controls time and time again. And the social dumping controls will continue. I've had social dumping controls, I think, from big controls since January. I think I had 15, which is quite a lot. A lot of trucks were being seized. You know what happens in every case. And I even see them for very small companies. I have one case in court. It's for a Romanian company. They had one truck and one driver, but they're still in court. So even the small ones are getting the controls. And of course, you have to understand that from a control perspective, with the mobility package, things got a lot easier for them. Because before, Belgian inspection, they didn't know how many drivers a company had. They had to write to Romania, to the inspection service, like to get all kinds of information. Now they only have to check the IMI register. They have all information there. The way they can do the control is a lot easier for them. So people should be very careful for the moment. I think a lot of them also think, yeah, now we have mobility package, controls will slow down. The controls will only go up, as at least what Belgium concerns. I'm seeing also that, and this was something new in the last 6 months, let's say, that before we didn't see many controls in Holland. So on our northern neighbor, we are seeing the first controls in Holland now also. Most of Holland companies, they are mostly, a lot of the cases I see are connected with Lithuania, because they have quite a lot of sister or daughter companies in Lithuania. I've seen the first cases there. And then, of course, we still have the cases in France. So the idea that the controls would slow down because of mobility package, it isn't happening. Actually, it has made the life of the control instances a lot easier. It's making them easier to do the control, so they can do more controls with the same personnel.
What about the legislation? Does Belgium already implemented the mobility package in the legislation?
Not fully. As you know, you have 3 parts. You have the driving times part, which really does not have to be integrated, because it's not a directive, but a reglement, a European reglement. The things about the return home of the truck is the same, so it's also a reglement. They don't have to imply it, only for the exceptions on multinational, on multimodal. The exceptions on multimodal, that they should make a decision, but I don't have it yet. The most important one is the part about the wages. So because that's a directive, they have to introduce it, and for the moment they haven't yet. But I've seen the text, so the texts are ready. They have been decided by the Belgian government, and they are now in Parliament, so they should be ready in the next 2 months, let's say.
If the European legislation is not yet implemented, can Belgium still fine already the companies?
Well, what we are seeing is, of course, most of the roadside inspections for the moment are not about this, the detachment for the moment, because it's not ready yet. So we have seen one action there, and they were not fining, they were only, how did they call it, warning the driver. It was like a first action, which was actually not far from here, from where I'm sitting right now, 10 kilometers. They stopped like 30 or 40 trucks, and they gave papers to the drivers, advising them on their rights and etc. However, we are seeing quite a lot of controls for the moment on the driving times and return of the driver, and the obligation to also write manual the changes of the countries in the tachograph. these I have every week, I have 4 or 5 cases coming in. So that's there the controls are coming, and they should be able also to do the controls about the return home of the truck. There's a big fight coming up on this, because the main question there is if Western European countries can give fines for this kind of infractions, or do they have to notify the country of origin, in your case Romania, and then Romania has to take additional steps. So we will have to see what the Belgian courts are going to say about this. There's a point to be made, honestly, from my point of view, for both sides. I have already my defense is ready, so we know what we're going to say when they come there. But I haven't seen so many about this. I have 1 or 2 maybe. So this is very limited for the moment. Most controls for the moment I've been seeing is about driving times, is about return of the driver, is about the of course sleeping in the truck, which is still going on, about the when you cross the border, the manual implication of border crossings. These are the cases we are having quite a lot, actually.
But if in the original text, in the mobility package, and we have the guidelines given by the DG Move, and they say that the controls and the fines should be given by the country of registration. How can this be modified by Belgian court, for instance? Well,
actually, if you look at but then you are talking about the second part of the mobility package, so the return of the truck. Not about cabotage, because cabotage, of course, they can control. It's clear in the legislation. But if we're talking about return of the truck, if you take a good view at the legal text themselves, actually it's not that clear at all. So for the moment, one of the points I'm using is, of course, also the text of DG Move, which indeed said that the control should be done by the country of origin, which is one of my arguments. So, but there's another one to be made. If you look at the text, I don't have it here with me, but there's one small sentence in there which has changed. If you look at the previous text, about the possibilities for the receiving countries to be able to check. What I'm quite sure of is that they can do the check. So they can do the control. I don't think that that's the problem. I think the main problem is if they can fine, if they can give sanctions. And I think there's a point to be made there.
There's another issue that I saw in a previous form of the mobility package, which in the end has been changed, and that is the last mile and the first mile for the intermodal transport. Before we were talking about that these parts will be considered cabotage. And we saw now in the guidelines from DG Move that actually this should be regulated by each country.
Yeah, correct.
I was surprised because honestly, I didn't know when it has been changed.
Yeah, but there's more changes there. If you, for example, I have done quite a lot of research on this, and there's a lot of changes during the different text of the mobility package where you cannot explain where it comes from. So it's strange, but this is one of them, and I think it's a completely stupid idea, this one, to give the member states freedom to decide if cabotage applies to multimodal operations, yes or no, if the license, the obligation to get a license applies, yes or no, because it's going to get really ugly. I know that, for example, in Holland, they first say, okay, we are going to abolish the exception, so cabotage will apply. Then they say, no, we are not. In Germany, it was the other way around. In Belgium, they haven't thought about it yet. So we will get, I think it's quite a stupid idea. Actually, they should make 1 point for all of Europe in one side or another. But it's going to be a nice fight for lawyers like myself.
That's very strange because you know that even the European Commission, Adina Vălean, said they will make the impact study, especially on these cabotage restrictions. So
Yeah.
it's surprising that there's a modification that we didn't notice because I personally didn't read the text after publishing because I knew before what was inside. But you have surprises because you see the text has been changed. And I think
the main problem is, but if you compare actually, and this is about politics, of course, but I think you did the same exercise as me. If you take the first proposition of the Commission on mobility package and you compare it with the final text on certain subjects, it's 100% different. And it's because the political negotiations with the European Parliament and especially with the European Council went completely wrong, according to me. They did not take into account. Honestly, the mobility packet is trying to do something in a very difficult way. If you're talking about social dumping or the way people perceive it in Western Europe, and why they try to fight it, is actually about social contributions. Because the big difference in costs, if you look at the social side of things, of course, the big difference is in the social contributions, because in most Eastern European countries, you were able to drive and pay a driver a minimum salary and a lot more daily allowances, which were not taxed, which is not possible in Western Europe. And the strangest thing is that if you want to do something about this, this is the major problem. This is the problem which, if you look at it honestly, which creates the discrepancy between Eastern and Western Europe. And if you look what they have done with it, they have changed everything besides the legislation on the social contributions, which is so surprising, because if you see that the problem is situated there, then you should take legal initiative on that level. But I think they were afraid because, of course, the social contributions vary along the countries. They don't want to disturb the individual countries. So they tried another way around, which makes things incredibly complicated for everybody and will not get around. I've been telling for years here in Western Europe to politicians, to control instance, look, if you really want one united market in transport for Europe, actually is easy. You have to do two things. You make one minimum salary for every driver in Europe, first step, and you make social contributions on the level of the European Union for all mobile workers. It shouldn't not only apply to drivers, but also, for example, for people who are working in the aircraft industry, who fly all the time. Is the same problems we are seeing there. Make them pay their contributions, not toward the individual member states, but make them pay towards Europe. It's a whole lot easier. Europe can redistribute the money towards, according to the nationalities of the drivers, and the problem is finished. And then you get a fair market. The main problem being that for the first propositions, the unions will never agree because, of course, Belgian unions don't want the minimum wage in Belgium to be lowered. And other countries don't want to make them higher, for example, Germany, because there's still a big difference between, for example, Germany and Belgium. It's more than €2 per hour difference. That's quite a big difference. It's 20%. That's one part of the thing. And the second part of this proposition is not going to happen because the individual member states want to have their own way to get their money and to decide what they want to do. And that's the major issue. And it's stupid that nobody takes up this glove and says, why don't you do it like that? Then it's even for everybody. If you're situated on the Ukrainian border in Romania, or you're at the coast in Belgium, then everybody is under the same rules, the same way of working applies. It's easier. You don't have to do all this kind of stupid controls. But I don't think that's going to happen in the next couple of years.
I saw recently that it was a discussion in Tran also. The Ministry of Transport from Belgium has this proposition of have a minimum wage for drivers all over Europe. So maybe he talked to you.
They did talk to me, actually. Yeah, but I've been telling this in Belgium for, I think, the last 5 years. Like, look, if you want to really change something, but the major problem is, how high is it going to be, this minimum wage? Are you going to put it on Belgium level, or are you going to put it on German level? Because if you're going to put it on German level, then it's lower than in Belgium. And could it be okay that all of a sudden a Belgian driver gets less per hour? I don't think so, that the unions will never agree to this principle. I think they should, because now we get these driver shortages in Belgium. And these driver shortages are caused because the social contributions in Belgium are way too high.
Yeah, but I think it should have been much easier than filling all these forms on the IMI portal and so many other conditions for nothing.
Well, actually, it's better, because if we would have continued as before with individual portals for each individual country, it's still more complicated. Now it's at least you have one portal. You don't have the obligation to have a representative in France anymore and stupid shit like this. Excuse my language, but it's a first step in the correct direction, I think.
But you heard that there's been some checks in France, and they still ask about.
Yeah, I have actually had the cases myself. And in all cases where I intervened, we intervened during quite a lot of controls at road I checked. We mostly won them all immediately, because I think that the instances in France have not been instructed properly on the fact that the SIPSI doesn't exist anymore. Or
exists, but only for a few countries.
Yeah, only it still exists, but not in transport.
What do you recommend to the transport, to how to organize, to plan their trips to avoid social dumping in the current conditions? Of course, they have to respect the mobility package first, but afterwards not do too many trips from in some countries, because in a way, if you look at the rules of posting, how they are described when the posting is applied. If they do long trips, for instance, the time for posting is not so high, because it's just on the territory of the country of loading and on the territory of the country of unloading. So all the transit is free. So if you do long trips, maybe you have 1 week from 4 when you have to apply posting regulations.
Well, of course, the answer to that question depends on the trips you are doing. So it's getting a lot more complicated. You really have to study what you are doing and the implications of the mobility package on what you are doing, which is exactly what we have done with the bigger clients. To really make a study, we already started with this more than a year ago, even for some 2 years ago, to try and make models on the implications of the mobility package. And a lot of the decisions which you see actually of people who are staying in Romania or leaving Romania and going to Germany or going back to Belgium are a part of these studies, because you have to look really at the transport which you are doing. If you are doing a lot of, for example, a lot of Belgium, Germany or Holland, Germany, then it makes sense to go to Germany, because then you're doing also quite a lot of bilateral transport if you're in Germany, which is cheaper if you look at the salary than doing it from Poland or from Romania, because you're doing bilateral. So in Belgium, you can still pay the German wages, which is a lot lower than the Belgian wages. So you really have to take everything into account. It's quite a lot of work, and which is one thing which you can say about the mobility package is that it favors the big companies, because they have the time and the experience to make this kind of studies. And of course, for the little companies or the smaller ones, it's a lot more difficult to see what the impact can be and how to organize themselves. So you really have to look at what you are doing as a transport company and where you are driving and how many times you are staying in each country. And that's what we did. For a lot of clients, we took, not every driver, of course, because that's too much work, but we took their main lines of transport, took a couple of drivers and started making calculations on what was going to happen, what was the impact of this, how much you're going to pay, what is your risk profile, where are you going to do your daily rest, where are you going to do the changes of the trucks for the drivers, etc., etc. And depending on that, we have in general 3 things we see. That is, some of them will stay in Romania or in really Eastern Europe countries. A lot of them are going to Germany. And then also a lot of them are, if, for example, the Belgian-Holland market is really important, we see a lot more trucks in Luxembourg and also in Belgium and in Holland. So it really depends. I have questions from clients from all over Europe opening up in Belgium, which is very expensive actually. But still, for the type of transport they are doing, they can do it. The really bad thing which happened was, of course, the war in Ukraine. Because at the end of last year and the beginning of this year, prices in transport were really nicely going up. The costs were also going up, but less. But everything changed with the war in Ukraine, and now the costs have risen dramatically, which once again makes the power of a transport company to decide on its prices a little bit less. But at the end of last year, I had clients who unilaterally written to their clients, like say, look, Mr. Client, you're going to, from the 1st of January, you're going to pay 25% more, or we're not doing the transport anymore because we don't have the drivers to do it. And if you want us to give you priority, you're going to, the highest one I heard was 25%. That's a lot, huh? It's enormous. On the average, we had augmentations here in Belgium, let's say about 10 till 15%, which is still a lot, not taking into account the diesel clauses, huh? Only real going up in price, which was nice, but with the war in Ukraine, everything was messed up once again. And what we are now seeing in Belgium is with diesel prices going up, a lot of people did not have diesel clauses or did not have good diesel clauses with their clients. And the last trimester in Belgium was the highest one in bankruptcies in transport ever. We have never seen so many bankruptcies, which was mostly caused by first the impact of the COVID crisis, of course, because there were already a lot of companies in problems, and then the diesel. So these are difficult times for everybody. It's really hard to organize yourself in a way that you can still make a little bit of money and get out of problems and not take too many risks. And it starts with studying what you are doing, where you're going to do it, what the cost implications are, what your risk profile is. And this is something which is better for bigger companies because they have the time and the money and the experts to do it, and the smaller ones, it's more difficult. And I hear the biggest people who are very nervous are the smaller ones, like they don't know how they are going to do this and how they can continue. And I've seen also clients in Romania, small companies who say, let's stop with this because it doesn't make sense anymore. The risks are too high. The money we get from it is too low. I don't know. It's difficult times.
You mentioned something about the diesel clause, and we are also thinking, if you have a problem in Belgium with applying this, think about Romania, where the companies are very small, and they have a lot of contracts with multinational companies, and they have very good contracts, and it's very difficult to change a contract or to ask for such a clause. Do you think is it possible to be asked legally to be introduced this diesel clause as mandatory for to protect?
On the Belgian law, it is.
It is?
Yeah, this is a very strange thing in Belgium.
Even if this is something that should be done in a commercial contract by parts.
No, actually, what I will try and explain this. In other countries, like for example in France, it's more clear because there it's in the law. In Belgium, in the law, and this is a very funny thing. In Belgium, it is a crime to do transport below the price which is legally necessary to do it. So you cannot do transport with losing money. It's a crime, actually. Of course, there's never been any court case, criminal case on this, but this is the argument we are using towards bigger companies. Like, come on, if you do not want to give us an augmentation of price, and we can prove that the price you are paying us is not sufficient to cover all expenses of the transport, including the management, because it's explicitly in the law that the price should be calculated from the cost of the truck, the diesel, the personnel, staff, but also the overhead costs which you are having. If you take everything into account and you see that you don't have enough, and the major cost for the moment is of course the diesel, then you have a case to be made according to Belgian law. And I know that in France it's a little bit easier because there is a lot of legislation in France for this, to be able to push this. So there is some legal argument to be made there, even if it's not in your contract.
So you mean if you've done some trips for a company and it paid according to the normal contract, if you make a claim to be reimbursed the increase of the diesel, extra cost,
you have a realistic chance of winning. Yeah, you have a realistic chance of winning, even if the contract says otherwise. But you will have to prove that you're not making any money on this transport. You will have to be very open about your cost structure as it is. That's the first step. And of course, once you are trying to push your clients, you can be very sure that you won't be driving for them any further. So you always should think from a commercial perspective if this is a wise idea.
Yeah, that's always the main issue when thinking about clauses, asking for more money, for damages, and so on. Another question: when you read, I think much more better than me, the mobility package. Is there any mention that you do if one driver or a company has too many drivers driving too much time in one country? To pay after, I don't know, after 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, actually to pay contributions in that country and also maybe fees?
No, of course.
Is there any remark like that in the mobility package?
Well, you of course have the changes towards Article 8 of the Reglement 1071, which states that you should have enough turnover in your own country, in the country of establishment. The problem with this is that it's very vague, really, really vague. You don't know how to interpret this, what do they mean by this? Should you have, I don't know, at least 5% local business or 20% or 50%? It's not there. What I can tell you is that from the Belgian perspective, they take it otherwise. They say, look, if you do too much here, then according to us, you are not a Romanian company, you're a Belgian company. And that depends on the facts in the case. I actually was in court yesterday. It was not for a Romanian client, but for a Slovak one. And that was the big question, because I asked the court, like, look, what you have to think about is if, as a transport company, it is allowed in European law to only do transport. Let's say I'm a Belgian transport company and I'm only going to do transport from Germany to France and back. Is it allowed? Yes, of course it is. Where is it written that I should have local turnover. What I should have, on the contrary, is a real base of operations in the country where I have my license. My trucks return there. The drivers take over the truck in that country. They at least once a month take their rest in this country. We have the majority of our suppliers in our own country, billing us in this country, etc., etc. So you have to look at a lot of individual facts and individual elements to see if you're more based in Eastern Europe or more in Western Europe. And it depends on the facts. I have to tell you honestly that most of the Eastern European countries, and then I mean Eastern owned companies who run into problems, for the moment, we are able to help them. On one condition is that they do not make a center of exploitation here. The ones who run into problems are people with one base in, for example, Romania. I have cases like this. And then another one where they rented the parking lot here in Belgium. They put 2 mechanics there to work a little bit on the trucks. They put a little office where they could take the documents, which they then sent. And then, of course, you have a problem, because then Western Europe is going to say, or Belgium is going to say, look, you have a center of business. It's here. Everything is organized here, even if it's not the entirety. So you always should look at the facts.
Yeah, but these were arguments for social dumping until now. But now,
but they still are.
You think
the social dumping legislation in Belgium hasn't changed. The only thing is it's become a little bit more clear. It hasn't changed. The cases will continue. Social dumping is not going away with the mobility package, even if you respect it.
What is the level of fines that you know that Belgium applies for, I don't know, for not returning the driver home, for not putting the country code when crossing another country?
For the moment in Belgium, they are asking about between 1,000 and 2,000 euros per violation, depending on how many you have.
So 1,000 minimum.
Yeah, it's a lot.
It is.
In France, it's going to be 750, I think, per infraction. And in Belgium, it's for the not returning home of the driver. I have cases where they're asking for 990 euros, and I have one where they are asking for 1,800 euros. Where the difference comes from, I don't know. This is one of the things we are attacking, to say, look, you are just making up these sums and taking whatever you want. This doesn't work like this.
And for not writing the code of the country?
Same.
The same? Wow, it's huge, because they said that this is something not so important. So
no, but in France, I think they are going to ask 135 euros per infraction, so that will be a lot lower. But the problem with that is, if you're never writing the country codes when you change, then you're going to have a lot of infractions. And then they can start multiplying, and that's the big issue there, I think.
So how do you think now that the companies will respect or not the mobility package? How do you see the big picture for this year?
The big picture is that we have quite a lot of big companies who are respecting, who I have my bigger clients, they are all respecting the mobility package, being quite strict there. The major issue is going to be the smaller ones, because there's a lot of them for whom it is not feasible to do so. There are, of course, exceptions on both cases. I also have big clients who are not respecting, who are saying, look, we will wait the European court decision and we will win, and we are not doing this. I think this is a very dangerous thing to do, honestly, very dangerous, because you're not only taking risk with these individual fines, but you're mostly taking risk in social dumping. So I advise most of my clients to really respect it and to respect it in a correct way. So I hear stories about putting trucks on trains to get them back every 8 weeks. I think this is a stupid idea, because then you're going to demonstrate that you're just trying to do the law, but in social dumping, they will use it against you. They will say, look, they are trying to fraud, they are trying to circumvent the law. The idea of the law, of course, being that the driver and the truck return to their home country. So that would not be a good idea. And I have also small clients who really respect this, but I see that for them it's a lot harder to organize this. What we are also seeing is also changes between countries. I think that, I don't know if you've seen this in Romania, but I see it in Poland, for example. A lot of Polish companies who are moving towards the German border all of a sudden, because if you're in Gdansk on the other side, and you have to drive back to Gdansk, or you have to drive back to the Polish border, that makes a big difference.
But unfortunately, our only neighbor in Western Europe is Hungary.
I know, but if you have to drive to the, let's see, from your side, if I take it, if you have to drive to Oradea or to the Black Sea, that makes a whole lot of difference, I think.
Yeah, I think this is going to happen also in Romania, but for the moment it's not very clear if you can do, if you open, let's say, a subsidiary on a city on the border, if this is respecting the mobility package for return.
I think so.
Truck,
actually, if
or
it's
it
an
should
official,
come to the main.
No, if it's an official subsidiary, then there shouldn't be a problem.
Yeah, just
you have to look at it from a bigger point of view. That is that for the Romanian company, their main point of interest is still in Romania. For a Western Europe letterbox country, their main point of interest is not in Romania, it's in Western Europe. That's the big difference. If I was you, I would go and inform myself, or as a Romanian transport industry, I would look what a country, for example, as Poland has done. What I see is that the way they are handling there is very smart, still protecting their own business in a smart way, in a legal correct way, in a way which is not so easily opposed by Western Europe, because they cannot. I have quite a lot of cases with Polish transport companies in social dumping. I see there that, for example, the local CNPP, it's called the ZUS in Poland, Social Security Institution, is giving a whole lot more support to the local industry than, for example, the CNPP in Romania. It's a big difference.
But do you know how Poland has implemented this return of the truck home legislation?
Like I told you, they have to return every 8 weeks, but you can open a subsidiary at the border.
What about the fines? Have you heard me?
Yeah, but which fines actually?
The fines if you don't return the truck home.
I don't know, and that in Poland I don't know.
Because I heard they are something less than 100 euros, something like that.
Could be. That I don't know. There's too much still. We are still studying too much. I don't have an overview of each country, which is very difficult for the moment to get this overview, because a lot of countries don't know yet.
Actually, Poland hasn't published yet the mobility package implementation. I saw that there are very few countries.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay, this is what I wanted to ask you, and we will come back to you with some other question when we'll have, and I hope that we will see each other in Cluj in November then. So make a promise for the transport companies.
I will, if I can, I will try and make it to Cluj. You know, I like to come to Cluj, and I will come there. So have a nice afternoon, and we will speak later.
Thank you, Frederik.
Okay, bye-bye, Marilena.